Hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel, and for this video, pag-uusapan natin ngayon kung paano gamitin ang component method in solving for resultant vectors na meron sa ating mga physics problems. And component method is like a more mathematical approach sa pag-solve ng mga resultant vectors, with the others being the parallelogram method and the polygon method. So, paano nga ba natin gagamitin itong component method? Before I proceed, do not forget to like and subscribe to the channel para mas pag-updated sa mga postings, mga learnings na meron about science and math. So, tara, let's proceed with how to use the component method. Okay, ayan. So, sa component method, ito yung mga formula na dapat nating gagamitin at i-consider, especially since this is a mathematical approach of solving and finding for the resultant vector. Now we have here the two formulas representing the components, horizontal component for the x-axis and then the vertical component for the y-axis. So we have here the a sine theta for the vertical again and a cosine theta. So yung a na nandito is yung general representation natin ng vector. So isa-substitute nyo lang, papalitan nyo lang kung ano mang mismong vector na or value ng vector na present. Okay? And then once na naharap na natin yung individual components, we will get the sum of the vectors along x component and then along the y component. And magmula dito sa summation of forces or summation of vectors, gagamitin natin yung mga yon para tayo ay mag-solve na ng resultant vector using the Pythagorean theorem for the magnitude, yung mismong value, and for the direction o yung mga angles, ito naman yung sa arctangent. So somewhat may application ni trigonometry, not only for the direction but also for the component. Sige, let us have an example para mas maintindihan. Determine the resultant vector of a 20 Newton force east, 35 Newton force 75 degrees south of east, and 10 Newton force west. So we have here three vectors. So yan, tatlo yung vectors na meron. And isa sa mga vectors na nabanggit ay may angle. Now you may represent yung vectors with this table. So nandito yung vector component along x o yung horizontal. Ito yung gagamitan natin ng cosine theta. Tapos dito naman sa y component yung may sine theta. In which ito naman nandito sa may right side yung mga formula. Okay, so individual vectors ay hahanapan natin ng component. So halimbawa itong si 20 newtons east. Okay, hahanapan natin ng x and y component. Ganon din yung sa dalawa pang vectors na meron. And aside from that, we have to consider also yung Cartesian plane. Diba? Yung north, south, along the y-axis, at saka yung east and west along the x-axis. Na kung saan magagamit naman natin ito sa pag-identify nung sign na meron sa vectors, and at the same time yung final direction, yung final direction din natin later sa ating resultant vector. Now sige, isa-isahin muna natin. 20 newtons east. Okay, so first itong vector na ito walang angle na nabanggit. So kapag walang angle na nabanggit, isa lang technically ang may component, either si x-axis or si y-axis, depende sa direction na nabanggit. In this case, we have here east. So dahil east ito and it lies along x-axis, diba? Kung papansinin din natin siya dito sa may Cartesian plane, dito natin siya ngayon ilalagay sa x component, sa horizontal component. Sa may y, well, wala tayong lalagay kasi wala siyang pang y component. So therefore, ang ating x component ay 20 newtons, yung y component 0. Additionally, since ang direction niya ay east, okay, and dito sa x-axis, ito yung positive side niya, diba? Tapos yung west naman yung negative, diba? Yung opposite. Same goes with the y-axis. Yung north side yung positive, yung south side yung negative. So dahil ang ating component ay along the east side of the x-axis, therefore positive yung magiging value niya. Next, we have 35 newtons, do not mind the period, 75 degrees south of east. At dahil may angle na nabanggit, we will have both x and y components. So parehas tayo magkakaroon ng value along x and y. And paano natin makukuha itong mga components na ito? Using the formulas na meron dito sa right side. So along x component, we will have the cosine theta, or we will use the cosine theta. So therefore, we will have 35 cosine 75. Okay, so yung f, balikan natin ito sa right side, yung f is yung mismong vector. In this case, we have the 35 newtons. Tapos yung theta, or yung angle, syempre yung angle, so 75. So using your calculator, so 35 cosine 75 degrees, we will have 9.06 newtons. Now also, yung syempre yung sine. In this case, positive. Kasi diba 75 degrees south of east. Now, bakit naging negative? Balikan natin yung direction ng vector, south of east. And along y-axis, it lies along the south side. And dahil syempre, and kung babalikan natin yung Cartesian plane, di ba? It lies along the negative side of the y-axis, yung south. So therefore, negative yung magiging y component natin. So negative 33.81 newtons. Also, do not forget na dapat naka-degree mode yung ating calculator. Okay, so check ninyo, ka-highlight sa taas ang calculator yung D o kaya deg. Hindi siya naka-grad or letter G, hindi rin naka-rad or letter R. And last vector, we have 10 newtons west. So dahil ito ngayon ay purely na nakalay along x-axis again, along the west side. And kung babalikan natin yung Cartesian plane, the negative side of the x-axis, so yung vector component natin ngayon ay negative 10 newtons. Therefore, yung vector component, yung x component ngayon ng ating vector ay negative 10 newtons. Along y-axis, ito ngayon ay 0. And once na nahanap natin yung individual vectors, we can now solve for the summation of vectors for both the x and the y-axis. Okay, so nahanap na natin, di ba, lahat ng components ng kada vector natin, no, meron tayong pang x and pang y, i-add na natin ito. Okay, technically i-add, but of course we have negative values, so syempre makaka-encounter tayo ng negative or may magsasubtract tayo. So katulad dito, 20 newtons plus 9.6 newtons plus negative 10 newtons. So technically we are adding, but ito ay negative, so magiging minus 10 newtons. And kapag in-add or nag-arithmetic tayo along the x-axis, we will have the summation of that 19.06 newtons. We have negative 33.81 naman along y-axis kasi syempre, ito lang naman yung vector, yung negative 33.81. So as is tayo dyan. Now, once na nahanap na nating individual and even the summation of forces along x and y components, we will now use the Pythagorean theorem to solve for the magnitude, and we will use the arctangent to solve for the direction. Yung direction naman is technically the angle, okay, nung ating the final angle ng ating resultant vector. Okay, so nasa last part na tayo. And with that, para mahanap yung magnitude, Pythagorean, so we will have 19.06 newtons raised to 2 plus negative 33.81 newtons raised to 2. So by substitution, although pwede nyo naman nang idiretso sa calculator. And more or less, ang magiging sagot ninyo is we have 38.84 newtons. Maari magkaiba lang tayo sa decimal. Kasi maari ang approach ninyo is diniretso nyo siya from the calculator, you input values diretso sa calcu. Yung iba naman maaring sinolve muna lahat ng nasa loob ng radical and then tsaka nag-square root. Next, nahanap na natin yung magnitude ng ating final vector or yung resultant vector. We will now use this one, the arctan, and then the ratio between the two summation of forces na naka-absolute value. So, magiging tangent, -1 by substitution. So, we have 33.81 newtons divided by 19.06 newtons. Okay? Tapos, pag sinab nyo yan, again, dapat naka-degree mode ang calcu. We will have 60.59 degrees. Okay, so kung nahanap na natin yung magnitude, nahanap na natin yung direction o yung angle, we will have this final answer of 38.84 newtons, 60.59 degrees south of east. So, saan naman ang galing nitong south of east? No? So, yung south of east, yung magiging direction yan, manggagaling dito sa ating summation of forces. Diba, remember yung may Cartesian plane? Yung north, south, east, west, positive, negative, diba? North, south, east, west. Diba? So, along x-axis, ito ay positive. Diba? Yung summation of force natin. Saan ba sa x-axis nagiging positive? It is on the east side. So, therefore, ito ay east. Meanwhile, yung force along y-axis, ito ay negative. And along diba? Within the Cartesian plane, yung south ang negative, so yung direction nito ay south. So therefore, south of east. Pero mauna yung y-axis ay yung y-axis direction. So yun muna mauna, and then we have, followed by the x-axis direction. So south of east. So ganun din, kung yung y-axis natin ay positive, edi syempre ito ay magiging north. Kung naging negative naman itong x-axis, edi magiging west. So, yung magiging direction natin, north of west. Kung sakali lang na ganun ang mangyayari. Therefore, ang pinaka-final vector natin ngayon, the resultant vector from the vectors given is 38.84 newtons, 60.59 degrees south of east. Okay? So, ayan. So, hopefully, you learned something from the concepts of component method. Not forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel para maging updated sa lahat pa ng mga postings natin about other concepts na meron sa science and math. So, thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time. Goodbye!